The movie opens up with an undercover IMF agent named Ethan Hunt being held by an arms dealer named Owen Davian. Owen asks the restrained Ethan where the rabbit's foot is, and after multiple beatings Ethan had endured by Owen's men, he seems disoriented and is unable to comprehend what Owen was asking for. However, he's soon brought to his senses when Owen points a gun toward his fiancée Julia and threatens to shoot her if Ethan doesn't answer his questions. At first, Ethan tries to reassure Owen that he can help him get the rabbit's foot if he lets Julia go, but when he shoots Julia in the leg, he starts threatening to kill him. And before Ethan can give Owen an answer, he shoots Julia and the screen goes black. Well, the scene changes to a few weeks earlier to Ethan and Julia's engagement party where their family had gathered to celebrate them. In the middle of the celebration, Ethan receives a phone call, and when he picks it up, an agent pretends to offer him a free trip, which is code for a meeting. Ethan tells Julia that he needs to get more ice for the party and heads to a convenience store near his house. There he meets up with an agent named Musgrave who tells him that an agent has gone missing in the field. Musgrave has arranged a team to rescue Agent Ferris and offers Ethan to join in. As Musgrave leaves, Ethan notices that he's left a digital camera behind, and in the camera, he'd installed a message that revealed details about the mission. Apparently, Agent Ferris went undercover and was following a man named Owen Davian, an important figure in the international black market. And she'd gone missing 11 hours earlier, and as soon as the briefing on the camera was over, the message self-destructs. Later that night, Ethan realizes that he wants to join in on the mission and shows up at the meetup point. He, along with the rest of the team, make it to the location where Agent Ferris was being held. Declan waits for the team in their getaway helicopter, while Zen cuts off all the electricity in the building. Ethan manages to sneak inside the building undetected and takes down the men around an injured Agent Ferris. He then injects Ferris with adrenaline, and once she can move on her own, the two then jump out the window onto the truck below, driven by Luther. As all of the agents get on the truck, they make their way toward a waiting Declan, and they barely get on the helicopter when they notice that another helicopter was tailing them. At the same time, Ferris begins to complain of an excruciating headache that prevents her from moving. While Declan tries to move the helicopter out of the enemy's helicopter's line of fire, Ethan uses a portable X-ray and finds that there's an actual explosive chip inside Ferris's brain. But before he can extract the chip, it explodes inside her brain, killing her immediately. The next morning, Ethan and Musgrave find themselves in a meeting with several other superior agents who reprimand them about their failed mission. An intelligence agent, Theodore Brussel, informs them that the man Agent Ferris was following was responsible for providing terrorist organizations with technological weapons while remaining invisible. A few days later, at Agent Ferris's funeral, Ethan is reminded of the fact that he was responsible for training Ferris and activating her as a field agent. His guilt trip is interrupted by a phone call from a mail service who informs him that he's received a letter from Agent Ferris. Ethan immediately goes to retrieve the letter and finds that Ferris was trying to send him a message by attaching a small device with information on it. When he gives the device to Luther, he is told that the device is empty. With no other choice left, the two of them head to the forensic department, where they meet a man who tells them that he had managed to retrieve a message from the broken laptops that they stole from the facility. He tells the agents that Owen is going to a party at the Vatican where he will be selling a weapon known as the Rabbit's Foot, which is worth $850 million. And this is the kind of weapon that can destroy anything and everything in its way. Hearing this, Ian tells the man not to inform Musgrave about his findings, and he then gathers the team and briefs them on their mission. Although Luther had his reservations about their plan, he agrees to back up Ian, and that night, Ethan visits Julia at the hospital and tells her that he's gonna go away for 2 days and that he wants to elope. She immediately agrees, and the two of them get married that night at the hospital, and the next day, Ethan and his team arrive in Italy, where they jump right into action. Declan creates a diversion, giving Ethan the chance to sneak past several people and climb onto the Vatican walls. He then disables the cameras before putting them on a loop. By the time Ethan makes his way inside the Vatican, Declan pretends to be a photographer and enters the Vatican as well. At the same time, Luther swims through an underground sewage system and manages to make his way inside. He meets up with Ethan and they wait for Zen to arrive at the party, and a few seconds later, Zen enters the party where she spots Owen and discreetly takes his pictures, and Luther uses a 3D printer to print a replica of Owen's face. Ethan wears the mask and sneaks inside the bathroom, and on the other hand, Zen pretends to accidentally bump into Owen, causing her to spill red wine on his suit. He heads to the bathroom where he sees Ethan dressed up just like him, and he knocks him out and steals the briefcase that he was carrying, and he then joins Zen outside where they pretend to leave for her hotel room. Outside, they meet up with Luther and Declan and head back to America, and when Owen regains consciousness and finds himself on a plane, he asks Ethan his name. Ethan refuses to answer and begins questioning him. However, instead of giving him an answer, Owen answers Ethan's questions with one other question, and he then tells Ethan that he's gonna find his wife and torture her in front of him before killing Ethan in front of her. Still, Ethan refuses to budge and give out any information about himself to Owen, and this is when Owen brings up Agent Ferris, and as soon as Ethan hears her name, he drags Owen to the plane's door and threatens to throw him out if he refuses to answer. Before he cut the ropes and pushed him out, Luther reminds him that killing prisoners is not really what they do. Back at the intelligence department, Musgrave is informed about the mission, who then reports to Brussels and tells him that Ethan and his team have Owen in custody. During this time, Luther receives a video from the dot that they'd given the forensics department to decrypt, and in the video, Ferris claims that she'd been tracking Owen and monitoring all his activities. However, one of the calls that she's traced led back to Brussels, and she then tells Ethan that she thinks that she's being set up, and all of a sudden an explosion occurs behind them, causing their car to get separated from the prisoner transport. Ethan quickly goes out of the car but discovers that a helicopter full of soldiers is waiting for them, and just as Ethan tells everyone to duck, they begin shooting, and in the chaos, Owen manages to escape while Ethan and his team rush to hide. At this point, Ethan realizes that Julia could be in danger and tries calling her, and when she doesn't pick up his calls, he goes to the hospital only to find that she's been kidnapped. He then goes outside where he gets surrounded by several agents who ask him to surrender. However, Ethan does not give up and makes a run for it, but he doesn't really get far as he's tackled to the ground and taken to a secret facility. There, he's tied up, and Brussels makes it seem as if he's a traitor, and sometime later, Musgrave enters his holding cell and whispers that Julia has been taken away to Shanghai. He manages to slip a knife into his hands before he leaves and asks the men outside to escort him to prison. As soon as Ethan is taken inside an elevator, he breaks free from his restraints and takes down the men surrounding him. Despite all the agents looking for him, Ethan manages to escape from the building, and he immediately makes his way to Shanghai to rescue Julia. There, he goes to the apartment that Musgrave had told him about, but finds it empty. He begins searching the apartment for hidden bugs, but is unable to find anything hidden there that would give him any clue as to where Julia was being kept. Just when he was about to give up, he hears footsteps outside his door, and as he prepares to fight, it turns out that it's actually his team who had been sent by Musgrave to help him out. Declan tells Ian that they need to steal the rabbit's foot and that they have the location thanks to the briefcase that they stole from Owen. A few minutes later, Ethan finds himself at the top of an apartment building, and Luther debriefs Ethan and tells him that he needs to grab the rabbit's foot and get out of the building before he can get caught by the building's security. Ethan then uses a zip line and gets inside the building, and as soon as he manages to grab the rabbit's foot, he jumps from the window and calls Zen and Declan, who are inside the escape vehicle, and once he gets inside, he contacts Musgrave and tells him about their location. And then he contacts Owen, who gives him a meetup location, and Ethan drives to the location and sends the rest of his team away. In the morning, a car picks up Ethan, and the driver gets him a drink and knocks him unconscious, and when he wakes up, he finds himself strapped to a chair with Julia strapped to another chair in front of him. Owen, who is standing next to her, tells him that he's planted an explosive chip in her head, which will go off if Ethan doesn't tell him where the rabbit's foot is. And when Ethan refuses to give up the location, he shoots Julia and leaves the room, and before Ethan can process what happened, he's joined by a Musgrave who reveals himself to be the traitor inside the IMF. and he's also the mastermind behind the rabbit's foot. He then tears off a mask from the person whom Ethan thought was Julia and reveals that Julia is actually still alive. Owen had actually killed another woman to scare him into confessing. And finally, Ethan tells Musgrave that he's gonna give him the location if he lets him hear Julia's voice, and Musgrave agrees, but as soon as he comes closer, Ethan jumps into action and grabs the pen before stabbing him with it, and with Musgrave dead, Ethan narrows down Owen's location and rushes there, and as soon as he spots Owen, he attacks him just as he spots Julia strapped to a chair. However, before he can get Julia, Owen activates the chip in his head and beats him until he can no longer move. This is when he notices Owen heading for Julia to kill her and uses his last strength to kill Owen before he could harm his wife. And then he tells Julia that she needs to shock him to kill the chip inside his head, and with no other choice left, Julia electrocutes him, causing him to pass out while she uses his gun to take down Owen's men. Several days later, a recovered Julia and Ethan go back to the headquarters where they meet with Russell, who tells Ethan about Musgrave double-crossing them, and the movie ends with Julia finally meeting Ethan's crew, who then celebrate their marriage.